And we're recording. You can go ahead at your pleasure.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order, and we constitute this meeting under the Ministerial Order M192. This regular council meeting of January 28th will be held virtually and is not able to be open to the public due to technical limitations at this time. And that in order to ensure openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability, in respect to the meeting, a recording of this meeting will be made available to view publicly within 3 days of this meeting being held. We'll go to item 2. Any late additions or deletions for
sorry,
the
Mr.
agenda?
Mayor. Sorry,
Yes.
Mr. That is a resolution that needs to be passed.
Okay. Do I have someone move, please? Councillor Wiebe, second Councillor Leach. Call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Resolution. Item 2.1. Are there any late additions or deletions for this agenda?
Not at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I need someone to move the January 28th Committee of the Whole agenda be adopted. Councillor Howe moves. Second, Councillor Leach. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. There be no delegations. We'll move to item 4.1. I need someone to move that the January 26, 2021 Committee of the Whole meetings be adopted as presented. Councillor Howe, second Councillor Wiebe. Any errors or omissions?
Mr. Mayor, the location on the original minutes was incorrect and stated the Municipal Hall. That has been corrected to say the mezzanine.
Mezzanine. Okay. Given that change, call the question. Those in favor? Carried. None opposed. Item 5. Staff financial plan bylaw.
Okay, so this will very much be our Chief Financial Officer's show. So I will let her lead this discussion and presentation. I think she has a wonderful PowerPoint she's put together that I've had a sneak peek at. There's some surprises in it, but they're good ones. So over to Mrs. LaRue.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone that's able to attend tonight. Sorry, Darren's not able to make it. I believe this meeting is being recorded and will be published later. So I think anybody who takes the time to watch it later when it's published on YouTube. During these unprecedented times of the pandemic, the preparation of our 5-year financial plan has to take on a different form. Unfortunately, due to the public health orders restricting gatherings, we're unable to invite everybody to an open house or other public meeting to lay out our 5-year plan. Instead, we're encouraging the public to check our website regularly and keep up to date. I welcome any public input, comments, concerns, anything. I'll leave my contact information up on the last slide of the presentation, so feel free to contact me with that. I'm going to try to share my screen here. And so if anybody could tell me that you're able to see that.
We have it.
Excellent, thank you. So council has worked hard for the last couple of months developing and fine-tuning their strategic objectives, which will be on the February 1st regular council meeting agenda for consideration and adoption. These strategic objectives are integral in developing a financial plan for projects and initiatives. That's why we're starting here with just the operating budget. There's no projects, initiatives, or service level changes included in this operating budget tonight. They will come at a later date after council's strategic objectives are adopted and staff is able to prioritize their requests based on council's goals for the next 2 years. So the plan tonight is to go over the details of the draft operating budget with the goal of having this committee recommend to council that they approve and adopt this operating budget. Tentatively, I'm hoping this will be scheduled for the February 16th regular council meeting. This depends, of course, on the results of this meeting tonight. If there's minor changes that are requested to the operating budget, these changes can be made by staff and can be brought in an amended budget to council on the 16th. However, if there's significant major changes requested to the operating budget, it may take some additional time and effort from staff to incorporate those, which may delay this process. As you're likely aware, the financial plan has to be adopted by council prior to the adoption of the tax rate bylaw and no later than May 14th of each year. So you might be thinking, why are you in a hurry right now? There's lots of time. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other bylaws that need to be prepared or amended this year as well that will depend entirely on this financial plan. As you'll hear later in the presentation, staff are recommending changes to the utility rate bylaws. Our parcel tax bylaws have expired and need to be updated and adopted. These bylaws, as well as the tax rate bylaw, will be a direct result, as I said, of the decisions that are made on the operating budget. As well, assuming the draft operating budget is approved and adopted, we'll be amending that bylaw to include any projects or initiatives that council decides to go ahead with. So here's what I have on the agenda for you tonight. Sorry, it's probably going to be a fairly long meeting. An overview of the 2021 draft operating budget with some information to help understand how it works. A detailed breakdown of the budgeted revenue by type, a detailed breakdown of budgeted expenses, some information on the COVID relief funding that the district received, a quick overview of the 5-year financial plan, and finally a discussion of the next steps that are upcoming. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. It's a little more difficult electronically, so it may be easier to wait until the end. Perhaps they'll be answered during the presentation. If I'm not able to answer your questions, I hope they're not fire related and somebody else who's attending from management here is able to help. And again, if any of the public who watch this recording later have questions, please contact me. I'll do my best to help or put you in contact with somebody that can. So the draft operating budget. A few things to remember as we go through all the slides, and no, they're not all numbers. The 2020 budget values shown in the first column on the left-hand side are the budget values that were originally adopted. They do not reflect the budget amendment that was done at the end of 2020. The reason for this is that the original adopted budget is what we show in the financial statements. This is a reporting requirement, so we try and keep it the same. The 2020 actuals, the next column over, have not been audited, obviously. That's coming in mid-March, and they've not been 100% completed. There's still a few random invoices coming in that apply to 2020 that haven't been paid yet. As well, the majority of the year-end transactions have been done, but there's still some outstanding as I work through the year-end. The next column, the 2020 projects, are those that council specifically approved as part of the budget. They still include the amounts of those projects that council later deferred or redlined because of the pandemic, because those technically are still in the budget. We reverse those out of the 2020 budget, and that's the amount you see in the next column under the 2020 base budget. The inflation figure that we use in developing the draft budget was 1.1%. This is the annual BC CPI or BC inflation figure for the 1-year period that ended October of 2020. The final column that you see here, the percentage variance adjusted for inflation, reduces the increase or decrease percentage from the base budget by this amount. So in other words, if you look at the line here for property taxes net, you'll see the 2021 budget is 1.4% higher than the base budget. However, the actual increase is only 0.3 if you take inflation into account. The district uses fund accounting. This is important for you to remember. You'll see that the district has 3 operating funds, the general, water, and sewer operating funds. We also have 3 capital funds, again, general, water, and sewer. The water funds can only be used for water, the sewer funds for sewer, and the rest of the district's operations are encompassed within the general fund. Here you see the draft budget broken down into the district's 3 operating funds. And the district's organizational reporting structure, it sort of moves from the right side of your screen to the left. The mixtures of employees, contractors, or consultants and volunteers are shown here in different colors. Exempt employees are shown in purple, the union employees in blue, volunteers in red, and the contractors or consultants are shown in the green boxes. And once again, we do use fund accounting. Our 3 operating funds, the general, water, and sewer, are further separated into departments and divisions. Many of the departments that we have are standard across municipalities, like the Public Works and Engineering, that you'll find in just about any municipality's financial statements. Others are segmented this way just for our reporting needs. There's no reason that building inspection and bylaw need to be separate. We just separate them because they report to 2 different supervisors, so it's important for us to be able to distinguish between the 2. And going through the draft budget, these slides will help you determine what's included in each of the line item groupings for revenue. For example, the taxation doesn't just include our municipal property taxes that we gathered for the district. It also includes grants in lieu of taxes that we receive from other parties, the 1% revenue sharing that we receive from utility companies, as well as parcel taxes that are included in the property tax billings. On the flip side here, we have the items that are included in the expense groupings. So salaries and wages, for example, it's not just what we pay our employees. It also includes our share of payroll deductions, CPP and EI, as well as our group benefit premiums, WCB, and pension as well. The largest source of revenue for the district is from our municipal property taxes. We are budgeting for property tax revenue. Again, that does include parcel taxes, the 1% revenue sharing, and grants in lieu of taxes. We're budgeting for revenue of about $2.6 million in 2021. This is an increase of just under $26,000 or 1.1% from the actual property tax revenue in 2020. Our next largest source of revenue that you can see here is from our utility charges. The draft budget being presented here tonight includes a 1.1% increase in utility fees instead of the greater than 18% increase in water and sewer rates that would be implemented if we make no changes to the user fee bylaws. This 1.1% increase in user rates results in a budgeted increase of approximately $21,000 in utility fee revenue. This is about $2,600 for garbage, $13,000 for sewer, and $54,000 in increased revenue. Sorry, $13,000 for water and $5,400 for sewer revenues. As you know, the district's responsibility as a municipality is to provide services to our citizens. It shouldn't surprise you that the greatest type of expense for us is salaries and wages for our employees to provide these services. Salaries and wages make up about $2.3 million or 34% of the budgeted expenses for the district in 2021. This is an increase of just over $72,000 or 3.2% of the budget in 2020. We did complete negotiations with CUPE, which resulted in an increase of 3% in wages for the majority of the rec center employees and an increase of 2.1% in wages for district employees. Increases in wages result in an incremental increase to premiums for group benefits and to the employer portion of payroll deductions. The next greatest expense for the district is amortization. This is the annual cost of the district using our assets, our tangible capital assets. The expense amounts to about $1.3 million, or 19% of the budgeted expenses in 2021. This isn't a cash expense, but it is a cost to the district as it does decrease the carrying value of our assets each year. Those same expenses shown grouped by department show that the department with the highest proportion of the district expenditures is Public Works and Engineering. This shouldn't surprise anybody, however, because when you think of the vast array of services and duties that Public Works is responsible for, think of road maintenance, street signs, storm sewers, hydrants, sidewalks, sweeping, sanding, the list goes on and on. And I'm just going to hopefully take this time to see if anybody has any questions so far. I'll just give you a minute if anybody has some questions so far. All right, we'll keep going. Is that still showing on everybody's screen now?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Thank you. So I said it wasn't all going to be numbers, but there is still some. You see here the district's revenue sources by type. You'll see that we're budgeting for a decrease in revenue of almost $87,000 in 2021, or about 1.3%. I'll go over the details of this in the next slides. As well, Council was previously provided with details of the draft budget broken down by fund, department, and division. I will make those available on our website for the public to view as well. So property taxes. This is our most significant type of revenue, municipal property taxes. As I previously mentioned, the draft budget does include a 1.1% increase in municipal property taxes over the actual revenue in 2020. You may also notice that the budgeted revenue from parcel taxes is less than both the budgeted and actual revenue in 2020. This is because we have paid off the long-term debenture for the sewer treatment plant. Therefore, we'll no longer be collecting parcel taxes to recoup this expense. You should note, though, that the district's policy is to begin transferring the service cost, so the principal and interest payments of debentures to a reserve fund. So although we no longer have the revenue from parcel taxes, we do still have an expense to transfer this amount into the district's sewer reserve fund. For utility connection fees and user rates, as I previously mentioned again, the draft budget includes a 1.1% increase in garbage, water, and sewer rates for 2021. The amounts here for garbage, water, and sewer fees are net of seniors discounts, and you'll see that we're typically quite accurate in our budgeting for these services, and our actuals are usually about bang on. This is because we know the properties that we have within the district. We know the services that they have in place. So we're able, with the user fee bylaws, to determine almost exactly what our revenue is going to be during the year. Sale of services, we don't sell anything. We actually do. This is kind of a grouping of a lot of different revenues. Our rentals and leases, primarily from the rec center, user fees for the fire department with fire protection fees, our cemetery, the fuel sales at the airport. We get a bit of revenue from building permits, development permits, and other sales of services like that. This is where we've seen the greatest impacts from the pandemic. You'll see that the 2020 actual revenue, the blue columns, are significantly less than the budget in most cases. No one knows exactly how long the effects of the pandemic are going to last. We're hoping not a whole lot longer, but staff have been conservative in budgeting these revenues for 2021. It is, of course, our hope that the revenues will begin returning to the pre-pandemic levels this year, but budgeting for a normal year in 2021 isn't reasonable. I don't know how many of you look at this and think, what the heck? Who budgeted for grants and transfers last year? This is actually quite a typical result of budgeting for this type of revenue. We often budget for projects that would be funded through grants, only to find out later we're not approved or that the project's not able to be completed during the year. You'll notice the budget in 2021 is quite low compared to 2020. The biggest reason for this is, again, this draft operating budget that we're looking at tonight does not include any projects or initiatives for this year. Those will be added through a budget amendment once council determines and adopts their strategic objectives, and they're able to delve deeper into the project requests from staff. Interest and penalties. This is the interest and penalties that we charge and collect on overdue property taxes and utilities. We are getting better as finance staff in collecting our property tax and utility revenues. This results, of course, in less penalties and interest being charged on these overdue accounts. In addition, last year, residents were provided with the extended due dates for property tax and utility billings. The property tax due date was extended from July 2nd to September 30th, and utilities were extended to September 15th. This, we assume, means that more people were able to pay their billings by the due dates. And investment income, another area that we saw a significant impact from the pandemic. The interest rates on our bank balances as well as our investment portfolios tanked really in 2020. And again, being conservative, we're anticipating that they'll remain low for most of 2021, hopefully begin increasing soon, at least for 2022's budget. And then moving along, yes, more numbers. You'll see the budgeted expenses for the district by type of expense. We are budgeting for an increase in expenses of about 122,000 or about 1.8% in 2021. And again, in the next few slides, I'll break this down in detail. Salaries and wages. So as I mentioned previously, and again, the district's responsibility is to provide services to our citizens. So salaries and wages for our employees to provide these services obviously make up the biggest portion of our expenses. You'll see here a breakdown of salaries and wages by department. It's important, however, to always consider them on the whole. We budget to have a certain number of employees for the year, working a certain number of hours for the year. But where these hours are worked, particularly for public works employees, isn't always known. So we might think they're going to be doing a lot of road maintenance during the year. Instead, they're doing a lot of mowing. This would change the department that the expenses are shown in. The district was under budget in 2020 and last year for almost every department's salaries and wages. This was mainly due, however, to closures resulting from the pandemic, as well as being unable to get summer students for the entire budgeted term. Employee expenses, although we were significantly under budget in 2020 for employee expenses, which is mainly travel and training for our employees and council to attend courses, seminars, conferences. We're not recommending that the budget be significantly decreased in 2021, as there's many courses and professional development seminars that are requirements of our employee certifications. Having said that, those staff have reduced the budget for management, travel and training by $7,500 for the year in anticipation of many of the courses being held virtually. This reduction, though, is partially offset by a budget for new employees. It shouldn't be surprising that the biggest portion of our materials and supplies budget, the biggest portion of expense is for supplies and for repair and maintenance of our buildings, our equipment, infrastructure. These budgets have been reduced for 2021, but only to better reflect our historical spending in these areas. Equipment and facilities. Not surprising, hydro costs make up the most significant portion of this expense. The latest update that I found on hydro rates included a 2.7% increase for 2021. This is what we're budgeting for. We have realized some savings last year in 2020 with the installation of the solar panels at the rec center. But until we have a full year of data, it's difficult to determine what the actual annual savings will be. Communications and information. So this item includes the cost of all of our communications, including landlines, cell phones, internet, websites, postage, advertising, printing and copying, and subscription costs, such as all of our computer software subscriptions. You'll see that the subscription costs in 2020 were over budget. This is mainly due to the pandemic and the need for software for EOC computers. This was reimbursed by the province, and also to enable access to our server for management to work remotely. The budget for communications is being increased in 2021 to account for the increased cost of cellular service for the district's employees and the mayor. Not surprising again, insurance costs are a significant expense for the district. We have insurance for all of our district vehicles, equipment, building and facilities, as well as liability insurance through the MIA, personal insurance for council and for our volunteer firefighters. Insurance premiums continue to increase annually with increases in rates from ICBC. They did say that there is going to be a rate reduction in 2021. I believe it was in May. I have not budgeted for this because honestly, I'll believe it when I see it. The budget for the rest of the items that make up this expense line are remaining relatively unchanged as well for 2020. Sorry, from 2020. Contracted services. We do require external engineers, contractors, consultants for a number of things, including the oversight of our sewer treatment plant, major construction and repair work, grant writing services, mechanical work, and garbage collection, to name a few. Although it appears the district was well under budget in 2020 in this area, that's mainly due to many of the projects being redlined and not initiated in this year. This is another budget item that will likely change when the projects and initiatives for the 5-year financial plan are determined, as a lot of studies, plans, and reports are contracted to external parties. Staff have reduced the operating budget slightly for contracted services. This is due to the increased training of our employees, which enables us to eliminate the need for contracted oversight at the water treatment plant, as well through the purchase of our hydrovac jetter, meaning we no longer have to contract that service. Grants, awards, and council expenses. Here we have all of the meeting expenses for council, awards and ceremonies. That would be our Freeman Award, our should we have or not a Christmas party. District memberships are those memberships that can't be applied to a department itself. They're for the district as a whole, such as our membership to the Chamber of Commerce, SILGA, UBCM. The fire department is reducing their budget in 2021 for awards and ceremonies in anticipation of the continuation of the COVID pandemic and the rules surrounding gatherings. So, trick question, and I'm gonna bring you all back, I hope. Anybody noticed a problem with the budget so far? Go ahead, Councillor Hoffel.
Well, other than that, I noticed that revenue is down by 86,000 and expenses are up by 122.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. That was a good comment, Councillor Hoffel. Not quite what I was going for, but along the same lines. So,
Jody, okay, are you getting, when Councillor Hoffel was speaking, there was a lot of feedback. Couldn't understand what she was saying. I can hear feedback on mine too.
sorry, there was a little bit of feedback. What I understood from Councillor Hoffel was the revenue was down by 70-something thousand and the expenses were up by 100-something thousand.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So actually, here's the same slide from the very beginning of my presentation. You'll see that the 2021 draft budget actually shows a deficit of just over $46,000. As you all know or should know, a municipality cannot budget a deficit in any year. So what are we going to do? This is where, in staff's opinion, the COVID relief funding comes into play. In November of 2020, the district received $880,000 from the province for COVID relief funding. The allowable uses for this funding that you'll see listed here are quite broad. The most significant to the district right now, in my opinion, is the ability to use these funds to help offset decreases in revenue that the district is anticipating as a direct result of the pandemic. There's no specific timeline that these funds have to be used. It is anticipated by the province, though, that the majority of the funding will be used in the next couple of years. So as I outlined earlier, there have been some significant impacts to the district's revenues as a direct result, we believe, of the COVID pandemic. Because it's anticipated that these decreases in revenues will eventually, we hope soon, level themselves back out. We don't recommend increasing taxes or fees to offset these shortfalls in revenues in the short term. Instead, we're recommending that approximately $208,000 of the COVID relief funding be used in 2021 to bring the district's budget out of a deficit. This slide here outlines the revenue shortfalls that we're anticipating are short-term and directly related to the pandemic, and therefore should be offset by this grant funding. If this COVID relief grant funding was not available, or if council chose not to use this funding to offset the decreased revenue, property tax revenues would have to increase by an additional 8.8% for a total increase of 9.9% if everything else in the proposed budget remained the same.
Joni, I have a question. Getting feedback.
I'm just gonna step. Joni, you having some feedback on your microphone when a councilor is asking a question? If you could just mute, please. Thank you.
Perfect. So Joni, I'm just going to get you to repeat the amount of the COVID relief funding. You said it was around $200,000. Is that correct?
So Councillor Leachy, the actual funding that we received was $880,000. We're recommending that we use about $208,000 of that funding.
Okay, and I'm making an assumption here, so correct me if I'm wrong. That's to cover, so on, I guess on the screen, it's a bit different on my paper, but I guess so the net surplus deficit, that is to cover the general operating fund, and is it the 2021 draft budget? Is that, are you adding it together? No, or not? I'm sorry, I might have been mixing things up.
That's okay. Sorry, I didn't know my screen was still up. I'm looking at all of you. So, so if you look here on this slide, the top blue line, the net surplus deficit, the top blue line shows 184,000 deficit in the general operating fund, 42,000 surplus, and 96,000 surplus in the sewer. Underneath that is what we're recommending that the funding be used for. So it's to offset the decreased interest that we're earning on our accounts. As I said, the interest rates tanked. The decrease that we're seeing in fire protection funding, this is sort of the long and short of it is if we spend less, we get less. The decrease in user fees that we've realized at the campground, the decrease in revenue from the rec center rentals and leases, as well as the decrease in revenue from the rec center passes and user fees. So here, the green line is what we're recommending the COVID relief funding be used for, 188,000 in the general fund, 11,000 in the water fund, and 8,000 in the sewer fund. That would bring our draft operating surplus to just under $162,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So again, as I said, the new budgeted surplus would be just under $162,000. That's just under $4,100 surplus in the general fund, $54,000 surplus in the water fund, and $104,000 surplus in the sewer fund. So because this surplus is so small, particularly in the general operating fund, we're not recommending reducing the recommended minimum tax increase that I mentioned, the 1.1%. We're not recommending that that be reduced at all regardless of any other changes that council may recommend to this operating budget. And finally, although we do focus always on the current year's budget, we're actually preparing a 5-year financial plan. Outlined here is the draft 5-year operating plan, which, as you know, we revisit every year. You'll see that we're budgeting for an increasing surplus in each of the coming years, but the actual amounts will likely change as we prepare each year for this process and we have more information available. Excuse me. To be clear, the budget is our best estimate. It's not written in stone. It can be amended at any time during the year as we get more accurate or more current information. Unless we have other information, all of the same assumptions have been used in the upcoming years as in the 2020 budget, like the 2.7% increase that I mentioned in hydro costs. As we get closer to next year, we may have better information that increases or decreases these amounts. The 5-year financial plan is especially important at the beginning of each year before the next before the new financial plan is adopted. As you're aware, we as district staff and council cannot spend funds that aren't budgeted. There's a few exceptions to that. So the financial plan that was adopted in the previous year is the provisional budget for the year until a new financial plan is prepared and adopted by council. A few things that that should be noted that are included in this draft operating budget that were redlined or deferred by council earlier in 2020. The $5,000 transfer to a new reserve to accumulate funds for upcoming accounting requirements, including asset retirement and contaminated site obligations. The $22,000 fee for service to the Historical Society. The $6,000 grant to the Miyazaki House. The increase in bylaw officer time to 3 days per week from 2.5. And the $5,000 the $5,000 for fire smart planning and initiatives. So if you remember at the beginning of this tonight, I mentioned a number of upcoming items after the operating budget is adopted. We'll be adding any of council's projects and initiatives or service level changes to the budget. I'm anticipating the need to change our utility rate bylaws, and we do have to update our parcel tax bylaws and calculate and adopt a tax rate bylaw for 2021. And that is what I have for you tonight. I am going to try and switch back here. Anybody who is viewing this later from the public, you can see the phone number for the district office as well as my email here. Feel free to contact me with any questions, comments, concerns, and I'll do my best to respond to those or put you in contact with somebody that can.
Joni, it's Peter here. Can you clarify again, the redlined items from 2020 budget, are they redlined now for 2021 or are they been instituted in the 2021? I didn't quite catch that.
So the items that were redlined, the items that were redlined in 2020 that were operating expenses, so those that would continue year after year, those have been incorporated into this draft budget. That's that $5,000 transfer to the reserve, the $22,000 for the Historical Society, $6,000 to the Miyazaki House, the increasing bylaw time from 2.5 days a week to 3, and the $5,000 for fire smart planning and initiatives.
Okay, good, thanks. That clarifies it for me. Any more questions or comments for clarification from council? Councillor Hoffel.
Okay, can I was just wondering, the bylaw and animal control on page 7, it's got allocated 67,000 for 220 base budget, and 2021 is 69,000. But I thought that was a partial grant. Is that a partial grant for 2021, or was it for 2020?
So sorry, if you could just mute your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's me. We're getting feedback. So in 2020, we did receive funding from EMBC for the increase in our bylaw officer hours. It actually increased from a half-time to a full-time position during the pandemic. That funding is now over. Should the district wish to have that position funded, that would now come from this COVID relief funding that I spoke about.
Yes, Councillor Hoffel, go ahead.
So then is it coming to council whether to make this a full-time position or not? Or are we doing this year by year? Or how is this going to work for this position?
So it hasn't been brought to council to make this a full-time position. I'm sorry, I can't recall offhand if it's one of the project requests that come later. Right now, because it was approved by council last year, but then redlined, right now the budget includes having that position 3 full days per week, instead of the 2.5 days per week that we had previously.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from council? No, hearing none. Thank you, Joni. Very well presented. Anything to add from our CAO?
I have nothing else to add to it. Just want to confirm that everyone has had their questions answered.
Well, we still have an opportunity at the next meeting to discuss it when it's tabled for final approval, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good, thanks. And I'm seeking someone to move that the financial plan bylaw staff reported dated January 22nd, 2021 be received for information, and that the draft operating budget be forwarded to council for approval. I assume you're still expecting that for February 1? It's moved by Councillor.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Through the mayor, we're proposing to bring this to the February 16 meeting so that the public has an opportunity to see all of these presentations and stuff beforehand.
Good. That's what I was inferring, is in terms of it gives us more time to glean through it as well as the public. Thank you for that. I thought I read somewhere that this was supposed to come to us in February 1st, which is a very short time frame. Thanks for that. Councillor Wiebe is moved. Who will second? Councillor Hoffel. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Joni. Very well put together. Okay, there being rise and report item 6.1. I need someone to move that the January 28th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting rise and report. Who will so move? Councillor Howe. Second, Councillor Wiebe. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, folks. Thank you, council. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening.